Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Kia ora team, hope you're having a great week. Now this week I'm super excited to bring to you my conversation that I have with Dr. James O Keefe. So Dr. O'Keefe is a cardiologist and medical director of the Charles and Barbara Duboc Cardio Health and Wellness Centre at St. Luke's Mid-American Hearts Institute. It's an enormous practice of more than 60 cardiologists. He's also a professor of medicine at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. Dr. O'Keefe has authored best-selling cardiovascular books for health professionals, including The Complete Guide to EKGs, Dyslipidemia Essentials, and Diabetes Essential. He has also authored or co-authored over 300 academic studies in the broad area of lifestyle and disease. And I became aware of Dr. O'Keefe many years ago, actually, and his work on the athlete heart, and had the pleasure of co-interviewing him with Bev over on Fitter Radio back in 2014. More recently, I heard him on the Peter Attia show, The Drive, and I really wanted to chat to him all about the athlete heart, any new and up-to-date information, and his recommendations in and around longevity. So this week, James and I talked about how he ended up basing his cardiology practice on lifestyle intervention, who is at risk of experiencing heart issues with too much exercise and who isn't, his recommendations for supplements to reduce risk of cardiovascular disease for athletes and non-athletes, his recommendations for optimal health, and his own daily practice for overall health. And in this episode, we mention a number of studies that James has co-authored or authored, and I'm linking to those in the show notes. So, without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Dr. James O'Keefe. Kia ora, Dr. O'Keefe. James, it's lovely to have you with me this morning. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mikki.
So now we have spoken before, many years ago actually, on Fitter Radio podcast, another show which I'm a co-host of. And, we talked in that interview about the athlete heart, which will be the basis of what I really want to chat to you about today. But, I was looking through PubMed, which is kind of like my Instagram. I love it that much. I'm on there all the time. And, the range of publications that you have to your name with regards to menopause, COVID-19, erectile dysfunction, Alzheimer's, they're very broad, but obviously they have this underlying basis of, they're lifestyle related. Is that unusual for a cardiologist to kind of have such a broad interest and expertise?
Well, I suppose I went into cardiology because I was, like yourself, an athlete, and I was fascinated by the function of the heart, and I got all trained up. In fact, I did interventional cardiology, learning to do stents and those kinds of things to fix hearts that were sick. And but then after doing that for a year or two, after fully trained, finally launched age 32, 33, after literally being in school, my whole up until age 33. Then I did that for a year or two, and then I realized, this is not the best way to treat heart disease. It's really much more effective to think about it from a prevention standpoint. Even once things have happened, you can really turn things around. So I'm in a big group of cardiologists, like 65 of us, and I'm a non-invasive cardiologist. I run our prevention programs, and it's like the golden age of prevention. We have so many really, really great therapies and strategies. And of course, exercise is one of the centerpieces of our preventive strategy. But there's a lot of other things, diet. I do a lot with diet and supplements and sleep and stress and, medications. So yeah, the thread that ties all those together is is sort of like looking at diet, lifestyle, and other factors that will help us to keep our heart healthy, to make it healthy if it's not healthy. But the heart, almost more than any other organ system, responds very quickly and very robustly to the right diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, so interesting. And you mentioned that you were an athlete, are an athlete, as I am an athlete as well. And it's I think it's really interesting your work in the field of kind of athlete heart and how, we, as a general population, exercise is really good for us. But then, of course, there is that dose response relationship, which obviously you've spent, a lot of your career kind of focusing on. I'll tell you, James, the first running book that I ever read was Jim Fixx's running book. I think it was just called Running or something like that. And being devastated to read in the back cover after absolutely just like devouring the book that he died of a heart attack whilst doing what he loved best, running.
And no, he was middle-aged too. He was like 50 or 48 or something. Yeah, really
I know.
tragic.
How did you feel when you kind of, I suppose, either did the light bulb kind of go off in your head, or what did you discover that made you go, hang on, there's something's not quite right here about people who exercise and that dose response relationship?
So I was a little surprised. And of course, I should say I'm a lifelong exercise addict. And I was, heavily addicted at the time. And I think it's a good addiction. I always tell people, yeah, you can overdo exercise, but it's a lot better than overdoing, cocaine or alcohol, or, abusing your partner, or, like a lot of people, like life can be stressful, right? Especially like this is a perfect example. And like if you're in an exercise habit, you might be all stressed out about COVID. You go for a run or a swim or do some yoga or lift some weights or whatever. You come back, you're chilled out. You're happy, more relaxed. It's a really great coping mechanism. And by the way, it's perfectly natural. This is why we're meant to kind of, diffuse stress. Like heard about tiger chasing us. We run as fast as we can and we get away and we come back. That was really scary, but everything's okay now.
Yeah.
So it is a natural way to reduce stress, but really from the beginnings of the exercise science movement, and really from the beginnings of the marathon, as you know, Phidippides like was a herald messenger, and he would run messengers around, and this was a particularly busy part of I think it was the Greco-Persian War in 491 BC, and he had run 165 miles in 48 hours before this, and on the final day of the war, the Greeks beat the Persians, and he ran 26 miles from Sparta to Athens. And on arrival, he said, victory is ours. And then he fell over dead, So like, I could raise a little red flags right there, but Paffenbarger, there's a guy named Ralph Paffenbarger, who was a real one of the pioneers in exercise science. And he even said way back in like this is like 30 years ago, 35 years ago, he had a paper in New England Journal of Medicine that showed in these Harvard graduates that they followed for several thousand graduates followed for, 15, 20 years, that sure enough exercise, there was this dose response relationship that was the steepest at the beginning, going from sedentary to moderate, and like you got a lot of reduction in premature mortality, and then it plateaued out, and then at the end there was like it's this reverse J curve. It turns back up. It sort of plateaus and then it turns back up, so that the people doing the highest, the small percentage, less than about 2% or less, doing extreme amounts of exercise, seem to get not as much benefit. They by no means did they lose all the benefit of exercise, but they didn't have life expectancy quite as good as the people who were doing less extreme amounts. And so he came away saying, oh, and then another pioneer that you probably know the name of, Ken Cooper, used to say, looking at his data, he said, if you're running for more than 15 miles per week, you're doing it for some reason other than health.
Yeah.
Because as you see this plateau after, like 15, actually, some studies show as little as 6 or 7 miles a week of running seems seems crazy, but the point is, you get this full benefit, like 40% reduction in premature mortality if you're
Yeah.
running 5 or 6 or 10 miles a week, or 15 or 20 or 25 or 30. You start getting above 30 or 30, then you start to lose some of the benefit. And that's just with running, and on it, um, but yeah, I mean, I think you can overdo it with other types of exercise too.
Yeah, and you talk about the reverse J curve in one of your recent publications on kind of the athlete heart, I believe in the last year, and I will link the Paffenberger, Ken Cooper, and your publications to the show notes. And you talk about the strenuous physical.
I think that was called Training for Longevity, right?
Yes, it
That's
was. Yeah.
So we kind of go through all the data there, and really make the point that, you don't need to baby yourself about exercise, but especially once you get past age 35 or 40, certainly in 45, your heart's not quite as resilient. And so, by no means would you give up exercise, but, I kind of did it myself. I just like backed off, stopped competing, and stopped, trying to, be as fast and my endurance, compare myself to my 20 or 25-year-old or 30-year-old self. I said, that's just not realistic. And I'm going to exercise more for the enjoyment, and do more, walking rather than running all the time. And of course, I wore out a hip too from running. I needed a hip replacement about 3 years ago. But I swim a lot. I walk 13, 14, 15,000 steps a day, nearly every day. I do yoga times a week, and I lift weights 2, 3 times a week. And I like the bike ride. So I'm still, probably spending as much time exercising, but I just not the intensity.
Yeah, that's because you did mention it's the strenuous physical activity that could potentially be one of the kind of deciding or influencing factors, right? And it's figuring out what strenuous is. And I guess personally, I'll be interested to hear what you think. This is my heart rate has always run high. So I started being active at a young age, at about, well, no, actually not young, 13. Okay, I was a real bookworm up until then, and then I just decided to get fit, not sure why. But I would attend gym classes every week like most days of the week after school, like circuit class and body attack and whatnot. I'd jump on their fitness tests that they would do like every 3 months. And I would be devastated every time I would fail because it was based on heart rate. And I will go 0 in the first couple of minutes of jogging, and my usual pace where aerobically it feels great, my heart rate about 160. And I'm 43. So that's, are there individual differences in and around that stuff, James, like the heart rate zones? And is it a perception of strenuous? Because for someone else, a heart rate at 160 at my age, for them, that's, them killing it. But for me, it doesn't feel that way. Is it? Or am I deluding myself, actually?
No. So these are really good questions, Mikki. And number one, women, even for any level of fitness, women tend to run a higher heart rate than men. And men who run a high resting heart rate have a bad prognosis. The same is not true for women. For whatever reason, women like yourself, my wife runs a heart rate like in that range too, and my mother, it's a lot of people who are fit, who are females, their heart rate is higher than it would be for a male. And actually, the fact that your heart rate goes up fast, it goes up to a high level, that's also a good thing. Our heart rate, there's that old formula, the 220 minus your age.
Yes.
So your heart rate shouldn't get above 177 beats a minute ever. You probably can get it. My guess is you probably can, and that's a good thing.
Okay.
It turns out the people who can't get their heart rate up to where it should be, that's actually a worrisome sign for men or women. Not terribly worrisome, but still makes you worrisome. And I really think people love to really focus on heart rate.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I have a Fitbit that monitors my heart rate all the time. And the only time I really pay attention to it is I look at my my resting heart rate while sleeping and look at the average, and if I'm overtrained or sick or stressed or underslept or whatever, my heart rate will start coming up.
Yeah, interesting.
something's wrong, like I need to do something about this. But like I think you can just use perceived exertion,
Mm,
like, and a simple sort of way to say this is strenuous exercise is if it's heart pounding, sweat producing exercise.
yeah,
That's strenuous. If or if you're exercising and you can't really carry on a conversation very well,
yeah,
that's strenuous exercise.
yeah.
The heart rate level is going to be different for everybody. So I'm not one who tells people to obsess about heart rate much.
Mate, you seriously have made my day. This has been worth it. We could stop this right now, and I would be just stoked because that is something that is legit been on my like I've just thought about over the years, particularly with, and I love Dr. Phil Maffetone's work on maximum aerobic function, the MAF testing, and things like that. And I've always really struggled to be in a position where my heart rate is low enough to kind of train at the rate with which you're recommended to train to get the best out of that particular session, because I'd almost have to like be standing still, like yeah.
Not relevant.
Yeah.
Not relevant. You just need to, like, when you're exerting mildly or moderately or strenuously, and you just go by that. And you can do I think heart rate would add nothing to your sort of like, the benefits of your training.
Nice. Thank you, James. That's awesome. Now, I looked at some of the information in and around the athlete heart and what could possibly go wrong. And of course, the first thing I think of is arrhythmias with a potential increased risk of atrial fibrillation in endurance athletes. And of course, if I did say anything wrong, please correct me, because this is just kind of going on stuff that I've read. Who specifically is at risk of arrhythmias?
Well, Mikki, you're right. Atrial fibrillation is probably the most common and most sort of concerning arrhythmia that athletes come up with. And I've seen it in 30 somethings who were world-class distance runners,
Yes.
like marathoners, half marathoners, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is when you're sitting here talking to me, or any of your listeners are, if you like, just hold your hand up and look at your hand in a fist. Okay, make a fist. That's about how big your heart is. Okay, and like just imagine your hands, your heart, and squeezing, say once every second or a little more than that, 60 or 70 beats a minute, and then and it's pumping about 5 liters of blood around your system every minute. Imagine that with your hand. Okay, an athlete like yourself, you're going out and hard, hammer up a hill hard as you can, a long hill. How many liters a minute do you think your heart's pumping out?
Oh, like triple that? I don't know.
Like quintuple that.
Wow.
Like 20 liters for an athlete. And elite athletes can be 30, 35. I mean, I think they measured Lance Armstrong and Miguel Indurain back in their heydays, in the range of 35 or 40 liters a minute.
Jeepers.
No, if you just think about that, if you just think about the physics of that, like 10 gallons a minute.
Yeah.
And your heart's like the size of your fist, is like, what? That can't be right. The point is, your heart, when it gets in good shape, especially, it's not only like, it's this phenomenal pump that, not only squeezes, but it like wrings out the blood. It pulls it in, and it actually sucks blood out of the lungs. It sucks the blood into the heart and pumps it out. It's just this like a turbocharged, amazing pump. Okay. And it's, that, like when we train up, like the hunter-gatherers, when they, chase after something or run away from a predator or somebody who's trying to hurt them, they wouldn't run for 2 hours. They'd run for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes. But so we're meant to have this phenomenal cardiac performance, but we're not really meant to like try to maintain that. And when you maintain this very high output, it starts to stretch, especially the thin pliable chambers like the atria.
Yeah.
And then after about 45 or 50 minutes of strenuous, continuous exercise, we sort of exhaust the circulating antioxidants that buffer the stress, the free radicals that come off, just like you're throwing fire, like sticks on a fire, okay, or you're burning gasoline in a performance engine. The more you burn, the faster it goes, the more exhaust there is. And that exhaust, even in the human, in the mammalian physiology, it inherently involves a fair amount of free radicals.
Yeah.
Our system is designed for that, and it's designed to completely buffer and neutralize those for about 45, 50 minutes. After that, we start generating these antioxidants, and we don't fully buffer them, these free radicals, and they can sear the inside of our arteries in our heart, and hence that's probably how you end up with trouble. And your catecholamines, your adrenal levels are high, and these big volumes stretching the heart, and especially if you're not 25 anymore or 30. 35, you put all that together, and it's a bit of a stress on the heart.
Yeah.
Train up for it, you can do it, you can be phenomenally effective, but as we get older and we become less resilient and less good at buffering these free radicals, it can cause trouble. And so one of the worst things that can happen is atrial fibrillation, because that can predispose to stroke. And I see a lot of athletes, endurance athletes, because it's one of this is one of my areas of special interest, who come to me who have, are otherwise perfectly healthy specimens, like, the middle-aged people who are highly fit. They look like $1 million, they're fit, their skin looks great. They got clear eyes, they're happy, but they just got a little too many hard miles on their engine.
Interesting. So it's much more of an issue for more experienced athletes, kind of yeah.
You're pretty much bulletproof from this stuff when you're a teenager or a 20-something.
Yeah. Now, James, you mentioned, that production of free radicals is that we are that almost overwhelms our system over time, and that's what's kind of creating the damage. Does that mean that, what difference does diet potentially, or other stresses, or other toxic burden, would that make a difference to the level of risk for an athlete, or do we not know that?
Yeah, this stuff, a lot of this, what I'm talking about, is speculative. This is all observational stuff. A lot of it's some personal experience of mine, but I must say that the data, in my opinion, are pretty consistently showing this. And I see people, all the time, who have various troubles from overdoing exercise.
Yeah.
Now, again, people out there way out on the extreme doing a lot of stuff, but no, that's a really good point. Some athletes, I've heard this many times, variations of this sort of axiom. They say, yeah, doc, I don't pay any attention to diet. I mean, I drink pot, I drink, carbonated soft drinks, sugared soft drinks, and I drink a fair amount of beer, and I do this, but if you run the engine hot enough, it'll burn any fuel.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's this kind of like, damn the torpedoes kind of thing. I'm skinny, I'm fit, I'm strong. I don't need, I can eat anything I want to. That's not true, because I do see the people who end up with, problems from overdoing exercise tend to also not be as conscientious about diet. So it does help to eat a high antioxidant diet, to avoid sugar, to avoid junk food, to get you sleep, to not be doing, cocaine or methamphetamine. And, in that regard, or smoking cigarettes, God forbid. But, things like coffee and tea are high in antioxidants. So as long as you're not, doing so much of it, it disturbs your sleep. That's a really good beverage for an athlete.
Yeah. And any supplements, James, that you regularly recommend your patients? And obviously this will be individual depending on who it is that you're talking to, but do you take any yourself, which you take in the on the basis that that it's actually, we presume this is going to be beneficial for the heart?
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of full disclosure, I founded a supplement company about 22 years ago called Cardio, and with the idea, again, that, and I don't get paid anything for this, but I do help them with the formulation of their products, find the best products and manufactured at the best places around the world, so that we kind of best in class. But I feel like most modern people, even athletes, even conscientious people, tend to not get as much omega-3.
Yeah.
The marine fats
Mm-hmm.
from deep water fish, for example. You can get them also from plant sources, like chia seeds or flaxseed. And seeds are great, and nuts are great. But I think most people, even if you're eating fish regularly, I think an omega-3 supplement is a good antioxidant. It's great for, reducing inflammation,
Mm.
and correlates with good brain and heart health.
Mm.
The other thing that a lot of athletes do well, and I take an omega-3 supplement. I take, a fairly good dose, like 4 grams of EPA plus DHA.
Mm.
Uh, and I also take some magnesium, even though, like, magnesium, if you're eating a good healthy diet, the magnesium sources in your diet are things like nuts and seeds and seafood and fish and legumes and leafy greens. I mean, these are the
Mm.
healthy on the planet. They also, not coincidentally, happen to be high in magnesium. Magnesium is kind of like the antidote to too much salt.
Yeah.
And athletes go through a lot of magnesium. We sweat out a lot of magnesium and salt. Magnesium is a really great thing to supplement.
Mm.
And take it before bedtime because it can make you kind of sleepy. It relaxes you. It's a nice natural way to, improve your sleep without having to get on, habit forming drugs. I mean, I really discourage people from taking prescription sleeping medications. But so magnesium is another one that I think a lot of people would, maybe 200 to 300 or up to 400 milligrams a day of
Mm.
magnesium
Mm-hmm.
um, is a pretty good idea, especially for athletes. Other things, vitamin D is really important, especially in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And, I mean, most people need to take, maybe, especially these days. Now in New Zealand, in the summer, like it is, you look pretty suntan, so your vitamin D level is probably just fine, Mikki. But in the winter, especially, most people need 2,000 units. It's a modest dose, and there's
Yeah.
really no toxicity of a modest dose like 2,000 units. But most multivitamins only have about 600 or 800 units. So
And
I
actually, in
think
New
vitamin.
Zealand, they only allow up to 1,000 international units to be sold in a kind of an individual dose, which I found really interesting. There's seems to be a lot of contention around vitamin D and the toxicity, which is, and then you look at people's vitamin D levels if you ever get blood tests, and they are consistently either at or around 50. Now, that's below that equates to 30, I think, in your
Mhm.
units,
Right, right.
which seems
And
very
30 is,
low.
in our units, 30 or more is good. I
Mm,
like like 40 to 60, for
yeah,
most people.
yeah,
But yeah, in America, I mean, at least 30% of people aren't there.
yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, it's a common deficiency that's easy to supplement.
James, may I ask, now you mentioned magnesium, and of course there are varying forms of magnesium. Oxide and hydroxide tend to not be as well kind of absorbed, and people can suffer GI issues. Do you have a preferred type of magnesium that you would recommend people look
Yeah,
for?
so some of them do cause some sort of looser stools, magnesium oxide, and but then there's several different types, and there's one called magnesium threonate, threonate, that crosses the blood-brain barrier. That's a particularly great one
Mm,
to take before bed if you need to improve your sleep. But it's much more expensive than the standard magnesium salts. Do you know what I do, Mikki, these days? I've been taking, like, it's just an old-fashioned thing, but I find it to be really effective. Is I have a big sort of like a training tub in the basement, like a steel oval
oh,
thing that's about,
yes,
yeah, and like I fill it up with nice hot water, and I put like 2 full cups of magnesium. It's Epsom salts,
mate.
mostly magnesium Epsom
Awesome.
salts. And that's like this old-fashioned sort of like folk medicine, for whatever ails you, you'd go to the mineral
Yeah,
baths. They're high in magnesium,
yeah,
and you do absorb a lot of that magnesium through your skin.
yeah.
And that is a really great way to get your magnesium levels up as well. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
That sounds amazing, actually. And that gives me a little bit of ammunition to take to the husband to continue to recommend us getting a spa pool. I mean, obviously it's quite different, but that warm water thing, kind of sort of similar.
Warm water, I mean, warm heat therapy is really good for you.
Yeah, yeah,
You
totally.
get hot, then I'll hop out and take a cold shower for like a half a minute or something, and then hop back in there.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, there's a fair amount of good science showing that heat therapy, whether it's sauna or steam or hot tub, is good for you. But I think it's especially good if you can have some magnesium salts in there.
Oh, no, that's great advice, James. If I ask about the the kind of arrhythmias and things like that, is there any risk with time of day or uh, time of year or day of the week? Because I often hear, I don't know whether this is folklore, but people say that there are more heart attacks on a Monday than there are like on the weekend
Well,
or anything.
there are more, there are more heart attacks on Monday. There's more heart attacks in the winter than the summer. There's more heart attacks in the early morning hours, like between about 2 or 3 in the morning
Mm,
and 8 or 9, 10 in the morning.
mm,
Had to do with hormones, with adrenaline
mm,
levels and cortisol levels. And but that being said, I tell people the best time of exercise, that's time when you can do it regularly
yeah.
and tend to have lower rates of sudden death than non-athletes, but there is some small risk of bad things happening.
Mm,
And I think you can mitigate that by, being reasonable about it. Don't push yourself if you're feeling sick or if you're feeling tired or you're overstressed. I mean, be gentle with your exercise.
mm.
But yeah, I mean, if you look at the best time of day to exercise, if you look at your hormonal profile, when you're best sort of suited to like perform well, it would be like mid to late afternoon.
Mm, mm. It's like the complete opposite of when I like to exercise, and that's fine because
Yeah.
it's
It's good anytime, really, compared to not exercising.
yeah, for sure. James, do you think that, I mean, there's so much more participation now in events like marathon and Ironman and trail running is another one, although I'm not sure, to the extent to which the risk would be the same, given the intensity for a lot of people is lower. But has that seen a rise in the percentage of people suffering from any kind of heart issues related to exercise?
Well, it's a very small percentage,
Okay.
like one in several thousand,
Mm,
and they're often people who are at risk.
mm-hmm.
So I don't discourage people from participating in events. Lots of times that helps them, kind of get motivated. I do discourage people from doing like making a career out of running marathons or ultra marathons
Yeah.
because to me it's kind of like climbing Mount Everest. I mean, you do it, you could kind of, feel good about it, you accomplish something, but you don't go back and do it every year. I mean, it's risky and
Yeah.
it's like it's just a little bit too much. Or some of these are just a lot too much. As you know, there's just some outrageously demanding
Mm.
extreme events that are just not wise.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because a lot of my clients, and I don't doubt you'll see the same, is, people come to me with this goal in mind for an endurance event that they want to do. And it's almost like they are in their mid-30s, they've ticked the career box, they've ticked the family box, and they're very focused and quite driven. And this is the next thing that they want to kind of accomplish. And that's a certain personality type, right? It's like that type A. They're the ones that will, I mean, this is a generalization, but they'll get up and they'll ignore other physical signs of ailment, and they'll go out and they'll do that training session, potentially even if their Aura ring or their Whoop or Fitbit sort of tells them otherwise. Like I often wondered whether part of the issue is it is that extreme kind of bunch of people, and potentially they're the people that you and I might see a little bit more of than, say, the mass general population who's just out there for the fun of it.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. And that's how you get injured, both, orthopedically and otherwise cardiac. Like I call this cardiac overuse injury.
Yeah. Yeah.
People who, you and I, who love to exercise, who are familiar with all the orthopedic overuse injuries like shin splints and
Mm.
Achilles tendonitis and plantar fasciitis and, well, any number of them, tennis elbow. I mean, I've had nearly all of them, but this is a cardiac overuse injury is like you're starting to get rhythm abnormalities or can accelerate calcification of the arteries. And um, but but yeah, so it's one of the reasons that I kind of started writing articles and doing some research on this is because people who love to exercise lots of times are cerebral people. These are
Mm.
thinkers, and and there's sort of a logical sort of fallacy that people fall into, that, when it comes to exercise, if some is good, if being fit is good, then being ultra fit is the best.
Mm,
And if running is good, running 100 miles is the best.
mm,
And that's just clearly not the case.
yeah.
That is so not the case. And so so a lot of people, I just explain to them, whether I'm writing it or doing a TED talk, or, talking to my patients or folks like yourself, I just remind them, if you're exercising for health, then you got to be careful to not overdo it.
Yeah, yeah.
Half of the population in America underdoes it,
Yes.
50%, so 170 million people.
Yeah.
And there might be 1 or 2% that are overdoing it, just a
Yeah.
fraction of that. And so the public health message needs to be, we need more exercise, but it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, for sure. Often it's the case with public health recommendations. It's, like it's the same with diet. Like, regardless of what it was the public health recommendations were, the standard kind of my plate versus Brazil food guidelines or whatever, they're never going to suit everyone. There's always kind of nuance out there, but there needs to be something. And so Australia and New Zealand follow similar principles with regards to physical activity guidelines as America does, or North America does. And I often hear people say, "Oh, I went for my 30-minute walk. I'm sweet. I've met my recommendations." And I just wonder how adequate that is to help reduce risk of, from underdoing it, because 30 minutes a day of activity in an environment like ours just seems pretty low, if I'm honest.
Right. And it is, but if you did that on a population-wide basis, you would
Yes.
markedly improve health as in America. And America is actually relatively active. Our big problem is our diet. It's just, you look at Americans compared to, say, like Taiwanese are very
Yes.
sedentary.
Yeah, interesting.
People in New Zealand and Australia are among the most active in the world.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah, on a population basis. Yeah, you guys are doing great. But again, that J curve, it flattens out. I mean, yeah, if they were doing a little bit of running, their improvement in life expectancy might be even a little better. But I'll tell you what, if you add some things like strength training
Yes.
and yoga and stuff like that into it, gardening,
Mm,
dancing.
mm.
So we've done studies, Mikki, that I think are super important. I try to remind myself of this all the time, is a, there is a component of exercise that is maybe the most important component of exercise for longevity and mental wellness, and that is play. A
Yeah.
physical interactive play is a
Mm,
mammalian invention, tens of millions of years old. These
mm.
mammals figured this out. Young mammals do it, but even adult mammals can do it, and humans, like dogs, are sort of designed to play well into adulthood. And um, there's a great old saying from Ben Franklin, who says, we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing.
Yeah, interesting. And what is it about
So,
play, James, that is so
play,
protective?
Mickey, before we had benzodiazepines for stress, or antidepressants for boosting your mood, or pain medications, opioids for pain. It's like
Mm,
play and prayer and things like that. Play is remarkably effective at boosting your mood. And it also, it's like you don't have to twist people's arm,
mm.
workout to go to the gym and where you've been working all day. So I'm going to go do my workout. To a lot of people who don't love exercise like you and I do, that's just another task. But if you
Yeah,
find something that feels like fun, that's play, that's social bonding, that's stress reducing, it improves their sleep, and then they want to do it again
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the next day or two later. Physical play, and we did a study looking at various workouts, various people who did different types of exercise, and the ones that involve physical interactive play,
Mm,
uh, tennis, badminton, soccer, golf, were at the top. I mean, if, running, swimming, cycling were in the middle, like 3 to 4 years improved life expectancy. Those interactive play sports,
yeah.
physical interactive play, was up to like 5 to up to 9.5 years in additional life expectancy. I mean, just phenomenal. And you know what was the least effective of all?
Triathlon.
No, that wasn't part of it, but it was um, gym workouts.
Oh, mate.
By yourself with your headphones
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
avoiding other people and just kind of, in your own little world. It's like, it's better than nothing. It was
Oh,
like one
yeah.
and a half improvement, life expectancy improvement. But, you're better off going outdoors to exercise and even take your dog with you.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when you're exercising, we're meant to be interacting.
Mm,
Okay.
mm.
Dog, house, or your neighbors, or gardening with your plants, or make it social and make it as fun or playful as you can. So I love to play basketball when I was a kid, and baseball, all that kind of stuff. And then I got really serious about triathlon, which was fun too, because you have your community and you do group rides and that kind of stuff. But most of the time I'd be training alone. And then more, in recent years, like after I did the study with some colleagues over in Denmark with this long-term study, and Dr. Peter Schnorr and Jacob Marat, and I kind of started collaborating with them. And we weren't looking for this result. We did this. We just said, okay, we're going to look at all these different sports and activities and see which one correlates best with longevity. And we do the data, and Jacob does this complex multivariable analysis. At the top comes out tennis, and second is badminton, and third is soccer, and then it's like golf. And I said, and then running, swimming, cycling are like in the middle of the pack, and then the weight, the weights and the treadmill stuff indoors is dead last. I said, oh, that's too bad. I mean, it's nonsense. And Jacob says, well, these are big data and highly statistical numbers, so you can think it's nonsense, but like statistically, there's something there. And then I started thinking about it, and I realized this is not about hammering your body into peak fitness. It's about playing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I realized I hadn't been playing for a long time. I mean, I've never been any good at tennis, but I thought, I'd like to play badminton when I was a kid. So like I bought a badminton net, and we've been playing badminton. I set up badminton, and like when my kids are home, or my next door neighbor has become my best friend. He's from India,
Yeah.
and he grew up playing badminton. He's an ace at badminton,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
his wife is quite good at it too. And so like we play doubles or singles, and we have a blast. And it
Yeah.
is true. You come in, you're sweaty, you're playing, you're laughing, and I sleep like a baby after I play
Yeah.
badminton. Down here, we only play outdoors, so I've not been playing as much, but we play like 2-3 times a week. And it's such a lovely addition to find whatever it is that feels like play to you, and prioritize it, because it correlates with health, happiness, and longevity.
So interesting. And I also wonder, James, because I know that you've got an interest in the brain and brain health, and you mentioned omega-3s before. How much of the elements of things like tennis and soccer and badminton, you have to think about what you're doing as well, So I wonder if there's anything there with regards to keeping your brain active at the same time as your body being active, and whether that would also confer some benefit. Of course, we don't know, we can't tease that out, but it's interesting.
No, I'm sure that's a big part of it, because the brain is fully engaged in the social activity, and you're doing these full range movements, with these sports, you're kind of lunging, and it doesn't really get your heart rate up in a sustained fashion, but it does correlate with, longevity and good mood.
Yeah. James, do you look at the younger generation and like your grandchildren?
I'm sorry for interrupting,
Yeah.
but one other point along those lines that you just made is that there was a big study um, that recently came out looking at 4 million people followed for years, and they were looking at mental health. And they found that those same sports correlated best. The team sports, the interactive sports correlated best with mental health. So again, the same sort of thing.
Yeah. And I wonder, James, whether you look at the younger generation now and despair a little bit with regards to the lack of activity, and not just, there's less opportunity for them to be active in terms of like walking to school or playing with their friends, and not just in this pandemic, but in general. But then if I think about children and their activities at lunchtime, in some instances they've got devices and they are just sitting there and they're interacting on their they're just looking at the devices, and they're no longer playing in the school ground, or kicking a soccer ball around and things like that. And I just wonder, not only of course what it's doing to their physical health to be so sedentary, but also just their mental health and well-being, and those neurons in their brain firing in a way that kind of optimizes growth and things like that. I often despair about that.
I completely agree. I mean, it's a huge deal. Like regular physical activity is the number one correlate for good mental health in teenagers. Okay.
Yeah.
It's super important. And so many kids, not their fault. I mean, these games are sort of, kind of fun and sort of addictive, but they play or binge watch TV. I mean, these habits, and it's like it, not only for their physical health and preventing obesity, but even more so for their mental well-being, and getting depressed and suicidal. And it's just, you can't, I mean, we are meant to be physical, interactive beings, and you just can't stay healthy that way. You just absolutely, it's a complete game changer. You have to, you have to, and I think we'll figure this out. It's like, it's such an instinctive kind of thing, but parents have to remind, and I just, it's just something we need to really work on.
It is. And I feel like I agree with you in that, I think we will figure it out, but I don't know that we will figure it out. Hopefully generations that kind of, coming through will figure it out. Like I've heard Dan Lieberman talk about how humans weren't meant to exercise. It's not in our innate being to exercise or train, because we are designed to move, and then because we were moving from place to place, we were either fighting for our food or running for our life, and then trying to conserve as much energy as possible. So it's no surprise really that there are these millions of people who do nothing. Like, it's actually more of a surprise that there are people like you and I who choose to be active for the enjoyment of it. So it's finding that avenue with which people, we're not getting rid of technology. That's not going anywhere, and the built environment isn't going anywhere. So it's being smart about how to use these things in our favor, I suppose.
Yeah, we need help sort of designing our structure, designing our days, designing, I think you go a long way as measuring, there's one of the most fundamental axioms of economics is the first step in changing anything is measuring it.
Yeah.
So you start measuring physical activity. A lot of people just don't like to do that, but you're right. We have an instinct to kind of like, save our energy, because we come from our ancestors where they were up moving all the time, 16, 18,000 steps a day, building, their homes, carrying stones, carrying water, procuring food, fighting off, enemies or whatever. They were like extremely active people. And so, they needed to rest, and I think that the people who do exercise these days do it because they start paying attention to their body, and they realize, gee, I feel better when I exercise. And then, like a lot of things, the more you do it, like you realize, like your day, you're just not happy when you don't move. Right? I mean, if you've really been exercising hard, you need a day or two off, but most of the time, it's like, it's like sleep. If you're underslept, if you don't get enough sleep, it's hard to be happy, almost impossibly happy the next day. It's like a baby. You're gonna be cranky. The baby's nap and take it on a plane, they're gonna cry, they're gonna be unhappy. We're like that. You don't sleep, if you don't get your exercise, if you don't get to play, you're not gonna be happy or healthy. You just got to pay attention to your body, and hopefully I know it's not going to be generations, because this is so blatantly obvious.
I hope
like
so.
We just got to turn this around.
Yeah.
In less than a generation, about one generation, we went from normal weight in America to like 70% of us obese and overweight. Like, we just can't keep doing that.
No, I hear you. But then if you look at smoking, like it took like 50 years or something for it to kind of filter through, for smoking now to be kind of thought of as what it is, something that kills someone. It just,
Mikki, this will happen much sooner, because
I hope so.
people don't like being obese.
Yeah.
And over. It bothers them. don't
Yeah.
sleep well, they don't look as good, their clothes don't fit. So there's a vanity component too. And then just the emotional thing. I mean, this is going to happen sooner than you think.
Oh, I really hope you're right. James, I have one more topic before I let you go, because I know that you've got a busy schedule, and it's a short topic. Don't worry. It is back to the heart. It's about the coronary artery calcification, your CAC, your CAC. Like, so what does the research show, with exercise and the relationship between CAC? Do athletes who might have a calcium score that is higher than expected for their age group, or even at the level expected of their age group, do they need to worry about that? Is exercise protective? Can you just describe any relationship that's known around that stuff?
Sure. Coronary artery calcium, we should have soft, supple, smooth coronary arteries. Arteries all through the body should have no calcium in them. That old term, hardening of the arteries, is an apt description of what happens with atherosclerosis. These plaques get calcified and the vessel gets hard, and that can predispose. It's one of the best markers. I recommend calcium scores. Everybody should have a cardio scan in middle age, women over 50, maybe men over 40, and at least one, because a lot of times you don't know you're growing this stuff until you look for it. And when you know you're growing it, there's a lot of things we can do to change that around. Athletes, especially like endurance athletes, have been doing really high volume, high intensity stuff, do tend to have more calcium in their arteries than age-matched controls. Now, so that's the bad news. The good news is it tends to be not as pernicious, not as malignant as calcification in non-athletes.
Okay.
Increases risk, but not as much as it would be in a non-exerciser. You can't regress it once it's there.
Okay.
We don't make it go away. And some more good news for females. It tends to be more of a male thing than a female thing.
Interesting.
The penalty paid for overdoing exercise, whether it's AFib or coronary calcification or even shortened life expectancy, is less apparent in female athletes than male athletes.
Interesting.
Testosterone and the beneficial effects of estrogen, but it's undeniably that's the case. And so, yeah, I would say it's just one more reason. You don't need to. I think it's just one more reason to be moderate about your exercise. Don't be making a habit out of marathons and ultra marathons. And I tell people, and this is all just, somewhat speculative based on best evidence, but I'll tell people, like, strenuous, heart pounding, sweat producing exercise more than about 4.5 hours a week is probably more than you need. If you want, from a health standpoint, you start losing some benefit after that. So if you want to do more exercise than that, do things like some yoga or some gardening, walking, or, because most of the data would suggest that light to moderate exercise, like activities of daily living, more is almost the more the better. You can't. That's not really stressing your heart to be doing moderate gardening or walking. Or,
that kind of zone 2-ish, zone 1, zone 2-ish, if we were thinking in zones. Yeah. And James, any dietary recommendations in and around the calcium score? Is there anything from a,
like we talked about earlier, magnesium is an anti-calcification thing. Keep your magnesium up. Omega-3 helps to prevent plaque to some degree. I don't know. We don't really have any data specifically about calcified plaque, but it's good. Omega-3 is good for keeping your brain plump and youthful. We just published a paper you can download. Your listeners can download. It's called the PESCO Mediterranean, PESCO, PESCO Mediterranean Diet with Intermittent Fasting.
Yes.
And that's a paper published in our biggest cardiac journal in the world, called the Journal of American College of Cardiology. And I published that. I wrote that with some of the top experts in the world. And it's kind of the best evidence for diet for longevity and general health. So you can just look up my name, James O Keefe, and the PESCO Mediterranean Diet. You can download that PDF, and it has a lot of specific information.
Yeah, I've seen that. That would be like a 2-hour conversation with you about that information. I'm curious, is that what you do, James, from a personal perspective?
Pretty much. That's what I do,
Yeah.
Fish, vegetables, nuts, seeds, water, maybe a glass of red wine most nights, and a little bit of tea. Coffee kind of bothers me, but
hang on, most nights, wine?
I would say, I used to have a glass of wine almost every night. Now it's maybe 5 nights a week, and I
Yeah.
rarely have more than 9 ounces. So if you added it up for the week, it would be less than 7 drinks a week. And I think if as long as you keep it under 7 or 8 for a female, and less than maybe 10 or 12 for a male, it correlates with good health. But I never tell people to take up alcohol just because
No.
it's such a slippery slope. A lot of people
My
try to-
husband edits this podcast for me. He is going to be stoked that you said that. I'm going to watch him do it, and his eyes will light up in delight that you've given him the green light. It's amazing. James, thank you so much. You're such a wealth of information. And as I said, like when I kind of dug a little deeper into your ResearchGate and PubMed, there are just so many topics that you have researched on and published on, and you are all over this longevity stuff and the whole, like the pescatarian, intermittent fasting, Mediterranean style approach, obviously from a heart health perspective, a brain perspective, Alzheimer's. That's something I've seen you also write about. You've talked about omega-3s a number of times, and it's, I know.
Curcumin, Mikki, curcumin.
Oh, yes.
Phenomenal. Curcumin for anti-inflammatory or brain boosting things, especially a curcumin called theracurmin from a Japanese company.
Yes.
Theracurmin, like amazing. We have this paper coming out that just came out in Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. Yeah, if you have family history, or if you have ApoE4, or if you have some worries about cognitive impairment, or if you have sore joints,
Yeah.
curcumin.
Amazing. Yeah. James, thank you. I'll let you get back to your patients. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
So team, that was my conversation with Dr. O'Keefe. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I gotta say, it was really great to talk to him about things around the lifestyle and the supplement side of things, because a lot of the supplements that we talked about are things which I would recommend people take for a host of reasons, and it's always great that, and other practitioners who are listening will feel similarly that their practices are in line with some of the top research practices in and around longevity, health, and heart disease. And also pretty pleased to hear that James enjoys a red wine most nights of the week, because that is something that I would also enjoy most nights of the week. So yes, now I will put some contact information for Dr. O'Keefe over on the show notes, pretty much where you can find him, and he's super accessible in terms of if you were to reach out, which I think is amazing for a guy like Dr. O'Keefe, who is super busy as well. So next week on the podcast, I'm delighted to share with you my conversation with Sarah Lake, a practitioner based in Christchurch who is trained in the practice of intuitive eating. Now, Dr. Eric Helms and I talked about intuitive eating on our podcast many episodes ago, actually, and I really wanted to speak to someone who is a real expert in the area, and I could go no further than Sarah. And her and I have a really robust conversation around the principles of intuitive eating, how they don't really align with the diet culture, and where health at every size sits within that piece as well. So I learned a lot from that conversation, and I don't doubt you will also. Until then though, you can find me over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, on Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden, and over on my website mikkiwilliden.com, where you can contact me direct for consultations or jump on and sign up to my nutrition coaching services. I have plans for fat loss, longevity, I have an athlete plan, and also just a plan to help you navigate real food eating in this modern day context. In addition to 28-day meal plans, you get shopping lists, you get weekly emails from me, which is a bit of a research kind of update. You also get Tuesday night forums and ability for me to answer your nutrition related questions 24/7 through our in-app messaging system. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please head over to the podcast platform that you are listening on and review and rate Mikkipedia, because it's the best way to share the love. Until next time though, guys, enjoy your week. See you later.